It's Barry! Barry, you lovable sack of nightmare fuel. You've haunted my dreams before
Barry,
and will happen again.
The lovable sack of nightmare fuel.
We're totes playing that over the top of the music. Okay, go ahead and read.
Welcome to Brotherhood, a spoiler-filled podcast where we review each episode of the deliciously nightmare-inducing TV show Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. My name is Timothy MacArthur, the taller brother.
And my name is Dylan MacArthur, the older brother.
Today's episode, Hidden Truths.
Turns out the secret ingredients were pigeons and sugar.
A spoonful of sugar really does make the medicine go down.
Even when the medicine is people. Okay, so...
Dun dun dun!
Literally, there was one thing going through my mind. As soon as I saw the fifth laboratory, I was like, oh, wait, does this mean? And then Armstrong has this thing where he's like, don't you get any funny ideas? And they're like, we promise we won't get any ideas. Cut to them sneaking over to the laboratory. And again, I'm thinking, oh, they really are they? It's gonna happen. And then, they get in. And as soon as they hit the grass, I was like, oh, yes, we're gonna happen. And then we see the two eyes and like, they're coming. And then down comes Barry the Chopper. And I'm like, yeah, Barry the Chopper. I'm gonna regret seeing you tonight. But for now, I'm excited.
Because it's like nostalgia.
I'm not quite sure that nostalgia is the right word for how I feel about Barry the Chopper, but...
I think it's like looking for what people feel when they look forward to being scared the crap out of.
I mean, like...
Is there a word for that?
It might be. Honestly, I think that's it, because this is one of the few things that I remember from the original series, was watching them sneaking into the fifth laboratory, which I think took maybe like 50 bajillion episodes in the original series. But when I was watching...
Well, not that much, but yeah, it took a lot more than in this one.
It took more than the 5 minutes that they spent in this episode.
Yeah, definitely.
But like, I remember seeing him in that show and just... He was scary, but it was in the aftermath when I continued to have nightmares about this character days after watching that it was like, oh gosh, this character is going to haunt me forever. And now he's back and I'm like, oh boy, I can't wait to not sleep tonight. So I think that we're just going to have to abandon the linear format that we so often fail but try to.
Yeah, let's just abandon that. I mean, I say let's...
This is going to be the Barry the Chopper special. So,
Barry the Chopper special.
So, he got hairier this time. Or maybe that was just because we're seeing, like, very slight bits of him right now. But I feel like he's got a bit more fur right now, as opposed to...
I think he might have a little bit more of that fur thing that he wears.
Does he have a beard? I can't tell.
He doesn't have a beard. I know he has that skull mask that creeps you out.
Let's look it up on Google.
But other than that, I have no idea.
Oh my gosh.
How do you spell it? Is it Barry the Chopper as in like B-E-R?
Okay, so B-A-R-R-Y. Oh my gosh.
B-A-R-R-Y. Okay, maybe that's why I didn't bring anything up on Amazon.
There's no way that we aren't going to put this image in the show notes.
Oh my gosh. That is amazing.
Tell me when you see the next one.
Oh my gosh. That is awesome. You know what's awesome is that I think I've gotten over how scared I am of him. So this isn't going to keep me from sleeping at night.
It might dearly affect the way that I sleep tonight. But we need to talk about this design because this is the one thing that I have from the original series that I can comment on and be like, let's compare how they work. Because the designs are different in this show slightly than they were for the original series.
I think it's that they wanted to make it more clear that his armor was a little bit more out of Alphonse's league. Like maybe it looks bulkier or something in the original series.
I mean, if we want to talk right off the bat about his body shape, he looks more like a fat guy.
Yeah, in this one,
he has a much more
that.
prominent middle in this design, which seems to be in line with the stereotypical image that there exists of the butcher character.
Yeah, you got a point there.
Spoiler alert, I already know that Barry is a butcher in a former life.
Yeah, I knew that too. But hey, we call it a spoiler-filled podcast for a reason.
They're only spoilers if I don't know about them. It's much more frenetic. I'm looking at the two different designs that there existed. In the original, he's kind of got this, like, Legolas mane trailing behind him.
Let me see it.
I mean, not quite Legolas, but it's a very elegant, long-haired thing flowing behind him.
And this one, it's more frizzy.
It looks like he's having a bad hair day, but he also has a lot of hair to have a bad hair day.
Oh, hey, you know what the hair kind of reminds me of?
What does it remind you of, Timothy?
The spiders.
Thank you. I was going to get there.
From The Hobbit. And it kind of has a similar feel now that I think about it.
And this is why I thought for a moment that maybe he has a beard, because those spiders also have crazy hair and beards.
Well, I don't think he has a beard in this one, but it looks like he has spikes on his skull mask.
He does, and those are pretty intense looking spikes.
I mean, his skull mask is already pretty metal looking.
I bet Barry the Chopper listens to Husker Du.
Who's Husker Du?
Husker Du is a band.
You sent me another image.
This is also going in the show notes. You've already seen this one. It's the detailed analysis of the design for the spiders from the Rankin Bass cartoon of The Hobbit.
Oh, yeah, that.
Where they're just talking about bunny ears, beard. What is this thing?
Googly eyes, arachnids with tusks, and what the heck are these deals when it's talking about what was supposed to look like fangs, but since the spiders already have mouths, it's like, what is the point of these two things?
If we want to talk about how to do a really good, scary design, there are two things that you have to get right. Number two, I think, is the mouth. You need to get their eating mechanisms right, because if it doesn't look like they couldn't chew you up in the most painful way possible, you're doing something wrong.
Yeah. Another way to make something look scary is the eyes.
Exactly. And
now, you don't need to include eyes. In fact, some of the scariest things don't even include eyes at all. But you can also make it look scary with eyes.
The two examples that immediately come to my mind of characters that don't have eyes but are nevertheless really deeply disturbing are the ring wraiths from The Lord of the Rings, and also, I can't remember the name of the character, but from Pan's Labyrinth, the one who holds his eyes in his hands.
Didn't they make a reference to that in a Kicks the PJ episode?
Yes.
With that genie? You know, he is like, I think I can be an assistant.
That is exactly what they were referencing in that episode.
Oh my gosh, that is amazing.
Very deeply disturbing character, but you have to get the eyes right. And there are many things that you could do with the eyes. A lot of people will omit them, as in the two examples that we gave. A lot of people will enlarge the eyes. You can
also make them really small. Like, well, you can make the eyes overall bigger, but the pupils really small. Like, you can just make them... You can make certain parts of the eyes disproportionate to each other.
Swirls, multi-layered pupils, just sort of anything to make this an unusual looking character and just throw it way out of what nature would actually want creatures to be able to be capable of. But for me, the most unnerving thing to do with eyes is to harken back to a skull design. This is something that I did for the design of the monster from the Tome of the Seashore, where the monster is this undead creature that hides within the ocean and attacks sea dwellers. His eyes have very prominent shadows around them to sort of harken back to that skull shape.
Which I think is good, because Barry the Chopper does the same, which is probably part of why it is so scary. And his pupils are also very small, which also makes him really creepy.
But this is a really, really compelling design, as we talked about. He looks more like a butcher. His hair sort of reflects his mental state. His mouth is terrifying and huge and pointy. He's got
the pointy stuff does kind of emphasize how terrifying it is.
He's got the big eyes with the pinpoints of light sort of hiding inside, which is, again, a nice little sort of contrast to the eyes of Alphonse Elric, who has these big glowing eyes from within the helmet.
Yeah, it's a good contrast, because it's like maybe the way his eyes are sort of reflect the state of his soul.
He also has a much
Okay.
more prominent mouth than Alphonse's helmet does. Like
Yeah, he
there's
does.
there's almost this A shape going on with his head. And I'm noticing that he has very expressive eyebrows.
Which is weird because he's a suit of armor.
Right. This is supposed to be a skull that he's using. Like, it shouldn't be animate. So I'm wondering in the future, and don't tell me, I want to discover for myself if this is going to be a sort of prominent part of his design, of his animation, or if this is going to be sort of like the rough drawings that we've talked about before, where it's just something that comes up every once in a while for dramatic effect.
I have no idea. I literally do not remember whether that happens at all.
There is one thing that I have to say about this character design that I don't think is that intimidating, and that is...
Ooh, hey, they have a Pokemon variant of Barry the Chopper here.
Gotta catch
Like
them all.
I think the Pokemon they're basing it off of, which makes sense, is one that has a skull mask. I forgot his name. I think it's Cubone.
Oh yeah, Cubone.
So yeah, it's really cool.
The one thing about this design that I don't find intimidating right now, and I didn't find it intimidating when I saw it, and I still don't looking at other designs, is his particular knife that he uses.
Yeah, it's a big knife. You don't want to mess with it, but still, it doesn't look scary. I think it's because it's way too square, you know?
Or maybe they should have allowed it to fit into the rest of his character design more. So maybe the fact that it's square isn't a problem because it's scary, but it's a problem because it just doesn't gel with the rest of his design, which is very curvaceous.
Because in other words,
it doesn't feel like it's his knife. Like, your weapon should be an extension of the character, and it should say something about that person. But all that this knife really tells us is that he really likes that knife. Like, that just happens to be the one that he uses.
Maybe he stole it is the idea.
But again, like, this is a character design thing. You want the weapon that they use to be a part of them. I honestly think, now that we've talked about it, I think that might be it, that it just doesn't match the rest of his design. The other thing that I'm going to say, and this is not something that I think that they would realistically be able to do because it would cost a lot in terms of time and animator man hours, there's no blood on that knife. There are no stains. There's no history to it.
Yeah, that's right. But if they included blood on it in every shot, like you said, that would take a lot.
That would be a continuity nightmare.
I'm kind of glad they didn't do that because that means we get all 66 episodes.
Either way, you and I are going to be doing this well into August.
Yeah, we are.
Are you going to be okay?
I think I'm going to be okay with it. As long as we have a certain number of breaks in between.
Good, because now I have a QQ for you.
Okay.
A couple episodes ago, we learned about the Ishvalan War. Why did they say in that episode that they went to war originally?
Can you give more context?
Okay, so we were introduced to Scar, who is explained as an Ishvalan, and we are Ishvalan. And we are given this brief explanation of once upon a time there was an Ishvalan war, and
or maybe it's Ishbal. I don't know. I think it's in this case pronounced Ishbal. I could be wrong.
It may be an instance of V and B being very similar in Japanese, and so just depending on who translates for the particular version that you're watching.
I remember it being pronounced Ishbal.
But the reason that I seem to remember off the top of my head is that the people of Ishval wanted to secede from the union of Amistris, and then that just sort of escalated until it resulted in all-out genocide.
Oh my gosh, Dylan.
Two things that you may say absolutely nothing about. I just want to throw them out there because they were what I immediately thought.
Okay, I'm going to put a hand over my mouth now because I think you're probably going to try and torture me with these.
My first question is, why Ishval? And two, was that for a Philosopher's Stone? I think it was. I genuinely think that what's going on there has to do with the creation of a Philosopher's Stone. And I just love hearing you just wince in pain as I say these two things.
You're going to be the death of me.
But it has to be. It's just like, it seems so incredibly clear to me that that's what they're going to do, because you need a supply of humans.
No comment.
And you need people who are important, as has been established when Lust says that Edward will make an excellent sacrifice. You need people who are significant. So, and there's something about Ishval, particularly when we learn about Scar, there's something about him that is unusual for humans. That is
no freaking comment.
That is Dylan's theorizing corner of the podcast. You're welcome.
Dylan's Theory Corner about FMA Brotherhood.
So far, I'm doing pretty well. Honestly, I've been doing pretty well with all of my guesses so far. I guessed that it involved humans, and I was right.
Oh, yes, we figured that out in this episode.
Yeah, but I mean, even the intro kind of intimates that that's what's going on when we have that camera shot that zooms in through the Philosopher's Stone and we see all the faces rising up within it. It's like, that's kind of an intimation that that's what's going to be going on. But also, like, just the tone of this show, you know that that's where it's going to go.
It's made of people. Actually, I kind of suspected.
But it was still, it didn't feel like an obvious thing. I felt clever for having come to this realization that that's where they were going to go with it.
I don't know whether I should make this picture my wallpaper, by the way. The picture of Barry the Chopper doesn't need Twitter. He's already following you.
That's going to be in the show notes, by the way.
Or maybe I could have the picture of him, like, with hearts in his eyes as a wallpaper.
With the Barry the Chopper special out of the way, and now that we've had Dylan's Theorizing Corner.
Dylan's Theorizing Corner.
Let's actually talk about this in a linear fashion. So,
yeah, lines.
We start off right away with the library has been burned down, and you know immediately from that, okay, this is going to be a good episode, because they aren't pulling back any punches. They are just going straight for the sweet, sweet drama in this episode.
But they also go straight for the comedy part. They have some pretty good comedy, I think.
We'll talk about Sheska in a minute. But we have the interaction between Lust and Gluttony, where he says, I can smell. And his description of Scar is very odd. Again, sort of hinting to me that Scar is probably not 100% human. But it just sort of stuck out to me as like, okay, there's something about this that we're going to learn more about in the future.
Yeah, he says that he smells like blood.
Or that he's hiding under the smell of blood, which I thought was very interesting. Again, no punches being pulled here. The very next scene, I believe, is Gluttony's confrontation with Scar. And they have their little thing. Obviously, Scar is not dead. And I feel very proud of Roy, because as soon as Roy comes onto the scene and they're like, well, it looks like he's dead, Roy knows the first rule of drama, which is that if there ain't a body, they ain't dead.
Indeed. Especially if the person fell off a cliff. They're still alive.
The characters could see the person in question being attacked, but if we don't see the body, they're not dead. So, good job, Roy. You know the first rule of drama. Also,
good job, indeed.
Here's a bit of a surprise. Roy wants to be Führer. That's interesting.
Yeah, I think he's ambitious is what they're getting at.
Also a nice little revelation that goes into nice contrast with Dylan's theory that the Führer is going to be a bad guy. Anyway. Oh, this was my first problem with the episode. As Roy is being clever, we cut to the people that are standing on the bridge watching. And Lust, or as I wrote down in my notes, Stretchy Claus and Jack Jack, they're in the midst of this crowd and they're delivering exposition. And nobody is at all perturbed by the fact that there are these two people talking really creepily about really creepy things.
And the other one happens to be a fully grown fat guy sucking on his thumb. Paying attention to them.
I thought that might have been a leg, but once they pulled out, it was like, oh, okay, it's just his hand. Okay. I guess my question is, why did the people who made this episode put them in a crowd? Because it doesn't seem to be saying anything intrinsically, but it brings up the question of, like, why is nobody noticing?
Yeah, it would have made more sense if they put them in the shadows. Like, even if the idea, maybe they're trying to send a message that everyone's oblivious. Like, nobody knows that it's unsafe outside.
Like, it doesn't, I don't think that it really sends that message. All that it does is send the message that everybody in Amestris who isn't important is just a wax doll. Or maybe that is what they were trying to insinuate. Secretly, everyone in Amestris is made of wax. Plot twist. The Philosopher's Stone is a candle.
Or maybe just the majority of people in that area were just really, really dumb.
Or maybe they just don't have a budget for these shows. Whatever the case.
The people in the area had no money on them, and so they weren't animated.
You can't afford to be alive, so you're just going to be stick figures. Oh, dear. Okay, now, after that, we are introduced to the character that you really enjoyed, Miss Sheska.
Yeah, I really love how she's introduced. She's introduced by name at first, and then they go to her house, and they're looking for her through her house, which is filled with books, tons of them. But then all of a sudden, as they're walking, Al hears a cry of help, and then he notices a hand, as if it's reaching forth for help, and then everyone's like, "Oh no!" And they start throwing books to the side and all that, trying to get this person out from the rubble of books.
This is one of the interesting things about this show, is that in that moment, you can't tell if you're building up to something really dramatic or if you're building up to a joke.
It was kind of a joke.
I mean, it was 100% a joke, because as soon as they pull the books off of her, you've got, like, the animated trail of tears running down her, being like, "I'm so sorry.
I'm so thankful, but I'm also sorry that I had to trouble you."
She is a humorous character. I wasn't a huge fan of the whole, all you have to do is be confident in yourself and eventually things will work out.
Because that happens already a lot in media. So, like, it's kind of annoying.
I mean, I understand why they did it, because Alphonse is talking to her as much as he is to his brother. And it feels natural when he's talking to his brother, but it didn't feel quite like the right thing to say to Sheska in that moment.
You just gotta believe.
Like, maybe if he had said something more along the lines of, you have skills, all you have to do is put forward those skills, rather than just believe in yourself, gal, and it'll all work out in the end.
Just use your talents, trust in those talents, and you'll do fine, is what they pretty much should have said.
Next note that I have, I love how they tie in the alchemy in this world to actual historical alchemy, in that they're reading the documents, and the two, Team Rocket, as I wrote in my notes, doesn't really know.
Team Rocket?
Because it's a guy and a gal, and they're both inept.
They are not Team Rocket. Team Rocket is far more inept than they are.
That's not the impression that I got from this episode.
Well, they aren't adept at alchemy, I can tell you that, but they're not inept at everything.
Okay, so Team Rocket, for now, they're looking through the recipes and they're like, sugar, these are just recipes for weird meals. Are you sure this is alchemy? And of course, as Edward explains, actually yes, but because alchemy is such a dangerous study and alchemists know this, they encrypt their information, and so they use code words. And I love that, because, I mean, that's how alchemy was done historically. It's also why chemistry and physics and all of the hard sciences really didn't take off until sort of late in European history, because people who studied those were alchemists, and they were very secretive and tried very hard to make sure that nobody else could see their work. I'll post a link to an episode of TED Hour where they talk about open source and how important it was to start sharing information between alchemists, and why that led to the Enlightenment. Anyway.
But it also makes sense that they would not share their work, because, like, one, it's that that's kind of their life.
I mean,
so,
for them it was a trade secret.
Yeah, but also another thing is that maybe some of them didn't want it being used for weaponry. I'm just speculating that some of them might have been like that. I don't know.
Anyway, they're doing their research, and eventually they discover the terrible truth that Dylan was right about, which is that the secret ingredient is love. No, it's humans.
Which I guess kind of counts as love.
the note that I have from this time period, which I thought was really interesting and a bit on the nose.
Yes.
Did you notice where they were learning about the Philosopher's Stone?
In a place with books.
And this is why you and I podcast together. So every so often, the camera cuts away and you see the exterior of where it is that they're studying. And in the corner is a little sign with the word red.
Oh!
I thought that was a little on the nose, and I'm not quite sure that anything is gained, really, from naming the place red.
I mean, I did notice it. It's just that I just didn't file it away as important. I was like, Well, they do have a lot of the color red in this show.
Oh, yeah. The color red is massively important in this show, not just the least of which because it's Edward's primary color in his character design. The only other note that I have from this episode is that Team Rocket is terrible with secrets.
Oh, yeah, they are. But then again, they may be terrible with secrets, but they also had Armstrong figure out the secret, which is already means that
well,
because...
it's important that he gets in on this action right now. First off, because he's a good guy, and it's pretty clear that his motivations are pure. And so if he were to find out that our main characters were doing something terrible, it would cause a rift between them. Also, it's really important because they need help. This is something that
Major Armstrong, despite liking to take his shirt off a lot, is a very effective fighter.
I mean, he's an effective fighter, but he gives their operation legitimacy because he has connections to people and things that our main characters don't. He also has wisdom and experience, and he's going to become sort of the adult figure in this situation who is going to give them rational but helpful advice.
And also give it in a really strange fashion because he's Armstrong.
Everyone's favorite homage to Dr. Manhattan.
I mean, at least Armstrong has pants on. He just takes off his shirt.
Thank you for wearing pants. Very much appreciated.
That'd be weird if someone in the episode said to Armstrong, "Thank you for wearing pants."
A handwritten note from Edward Elric. Well, that's all we have for this episode. We'll probably have way more to say about the next episode if it's anything like what I remember it being in the original series. But
original.
Until then, you'll hear us in the future.
Future. Goodbye.
Goodbye.